Building a web UI for the Pico 2W could be a thing of the past using Mongoose's new UI Builder. Let's take a look. Hi, I'm John, your concierge to the world of the Raspberry Pi Pico, Pico 2, IoT and other fun tech. Remember to subscribe and join the community. Mongoose have rewritten the Web UI Builder, which is great and is now very usable in projects. This is a new major update for Mongoose, and of course there are one or two little glitches to get over. It has though literally taken me a couple of hours to build a web service demo that can control an LED and get the temperature updated live on a web page. What is more, I've not written one line of HTML or JavaScript. I haven't even had to write any JSON processing for handling the web service. All of this has been handled by the UI Builder. If you like this video and it helps your learning or projects, then why not drop me a cash tip? Remember, you can use that super thanks button below the video, or there's a payment link in the description. I'm saving these up to get myself to the open source conference in San Francisco, and I'd appreciate your help in getting me there, and I'd love to meet you there too. Thank you very much for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe. This video is sponsored by Sysanta Software Limited and their great product, the Mongoose web server. Mongoose has been around since 2004. It's used in thousands of products and has millions of live units. It supports both the Pico and Pico 2, the RP2040 and RP2350 architectures, plus the Wi-Fi modules used on these devices, as well as some other networking options such as WIZNet modules. Mongoose provides a web server that can serve static files like HTML, CSS and JavaScript, plus calls into your code via callbacks for dynamic functions and data retrieval. It also includes its own TLS library for security and even a wizard for designing your own web apps with minimal front-end development. Mongoose is available either with GPL version 2 with community support or full commercial support via a commercial license. Go check out Mongoose after you watch the rest of the video of my great experience with the product. So let's go into the UI Builder and see what we can build. And I'm going to go and build a new project and start from scratch. So we're going to create a C++ project from scratch. I want it to be for the Pico 2W. And I'm going to start from a completely blank screen, because why not? That is in some ways the most terrifying thing to start with, of course, always, but let's start there. So we've got a few things here. The way that this is going to appear as an application, we are going to have a bit of a dashboard, controls and menus down the left, and then the main canvas in the middle here. And down the bottom here is all my controls to actually add things and play with settings. And then we've got up the top here the ability to save the project, which basically means just downloading a JSON file, or to actually generate the C++ and download or C code and download an entire zip file of that ready for us to work from. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to set up a really simple web UI project. So let's just make sure that we've got the web UI is turned on, and we're going to connect via HTTP, so that's turned on as well. That's all good. The other things we can generally turn off. One of the things I want to do on this project though is I want to actively just continue to see what the temperature is of my Pico W, or Pico 2W. So I'm going to use this auto update interval, and I'm just going to set that to 2, which will just mean that every 2 seconds it will just check the heartbeat and check the status of my app, and when that state data updates, I will cause an update onto our web GUI. So what should we put up on our web GUI? Well, let's have a look at some UI elements. So this is largely sort of container based and sort of a hierarchy of containers, which I suspect is becoming a hierarchy of divs in HTML terms, but of course because we're using the UI Builder we certainly don't need to worry about that. So let's create a container first and bung that up here. we go. There we are. Put a container in, and I'm actually going to have two containers. So the first container I'm going to create, I'm going to place in it basically an LED control to be able to turn on or off an external LED connected to my Pico. So let's put another container in there that we're going to have. So those containers are nested, and this container I've just created is what I'm going to use for my LED control. And I'd like my LED control to be oriented in terms of children in a vertical direction. So, you know, I want a title and then a control underneath that title. So let's bung up a title then. So let's find some text. There's a text, and we will place that up there in the container. We will give the text a title, which we will say LED control. And that should come up there nicely. Now we can then have a toggle switch, which I'm going to now put it down here and use it, but that's appeared there. So that's underneath my text label. And in a minute, we will connect that to some state information, so that we'll be able to actually set a value. But I'd also like to have another container in here and actually have temperature information. So I'm going to put temperature information in as an additional container. Now, it is sometimes just a little bit tricky getting this sort of stuff to go where you want it in this UI. I found I've not got quite used to that yet, I think, but that's, I'm sure, will come with a little bit more practice. So let's just put a title in here, and I've lost the there we are, text. That's what I was looking for. So let's put text in here, and we call this temperature or temp, because I'm not entirely sure I can spell temperature always. So we just put temp in there, and then let's put a gauge in as well underneath that. So I've got a gauge that will have my temperature. Now I'm going to try and reorganize these a bit, because I'd really prefer to have the LED on top and then the temperature and the temperature sensor below that. There we go. That should do nicely. I'm just going to reduce the width of this a bit to fixed width, and bring that in a bit because it looks a little bit on the silly side. Let's drop that down to 50. Sorry. There we go. That looks a bit better. So just to stop it being a little bit too out of control and in size and stuff. And that's the tiny little simple dashboard I'm going to do. Now, of course, we're going to need to get that data across to our Pico. Now, in previous sort of examples I've done with Mongoose, I've written custom web services within Mongoose in order to do that. This time I'm not going to do that. This time we're going to let the UI designer write those for us. So let's go into the REST API, and we will create a new endpoint, and we're going to call it, I think, state. And it's going to be data, and it's not going to be read only, because one of the things I want it to contain is the status of that LED, and that needs to be set from the UI. Temperature, you know, you can't set that from the UI, but never mind, it'll be fine. So we're going to have something here called LED on, which is going to be a Boolean with a default value of false, and that's going to be so that I can turn the LED on or turn the LED off. And the other one I'd like to have in here is temperature. And that's going to be a double, and we'll give it a default value of 0. So those are going to be the values that I'm going to have in my RESTful API. Now, because I've written them there and I've now defined that, and indeed we've got some stub glue code that it's proposing to write for us here as well, to be able to get and set that state. We can now go back to our UI and to our UI elements, and we can actually have set them and change how these are connected, if you like, to those APIs and the RESTful API data. So here, where for my LED to turn it on, it's already offering me the opportunity to just get that control to set state LED on, which is exactly what I want to do. So that's the bit that's done. And for temperature, I can do the same. In fact, it's already selected and put in there state.temperature. Easy. So this stuff is quite easy for getting this to connect. Now, of course, this doesn't look the most graphically appealing page. We could go and change colors. We could go and change cascade style sheets. We could change fonts. We could manipulate it and do all of that sort of stuff. But for simplicity, I'm not going to do any of that right now. All I'm going to do now is I'm going to save it, which means that I've now got a JSON file downloaded with all of the data of how I laid all this out. And then I'm going to generate some code. And that's given me a zip file, which we can now go and look at and modify to actually run our code and connect it to some real hardware. So let's go do that. Right, so here is my Mongoose Test 3, which is this UI builder, and this is pretty much all the code that we've just downloaded from the UI, and it's actually created for us. There are a few gotchas I've found when I was playing with this that need a little bit of massage just to make things work okay. So we'll go through a couple of things. So first of all, looking at the cmake list.txt file. So this has all been set up for us of how to actually build the firmware for this particular project. Now, it's actually missing that it's going to be building it for a Pico 2W as its target. So I'll add that in because otherwise things are not going to go quite to plan. The other thing I'm going to start to do already is look at this libraries list down here. Now, one of my plan is to touch the onboard temperature sensor on the Pico 2W, and so I'm going to also need to add into this hardware ADC, the analog to digital converter. Now, when I write my projects and things, I tend to use the UART output for standard I/O rather than USB. So I'm going to turn on off USB for my preference, and I'm going to turn on UART, and I'm going to reroute UART to be on pin 16 and 17, which is my preferred pins for them. But you know, you can do whatever is your normal there. That's just me being me, honest. And I'm going to write some additional glue code that's going to connect things together. So I also want to just have a look at the various bits of source that Mongoose has put in for us here. And to the end of that list, I'm going to add one called state.c, which is where I'm actually going to do the connection of how the state information that's coming over and we defined in that RESTful API, how that's going to come and do something useful on my side. So those are all the updates I actually really need to do or worry about at this point for the cmake list.txt file. So where is everything? What else have we got here? Well, we have the main program, which is basically just initiating Mongoose, and that's pretty much all that's in here, and it's going to flash the onboard LED just to say that everything is going. Now, there is a little bit of a change that you need to do here, because firstly, this isn't how I'm going to put my credentials in. Yes, I'm going to make them into Wi-Fi SID and Wi-Fi password, but I'm certainly not going to define them in my C code, because then I might accidentally put it into GitHub, and that would be a bad thing to do. So my Wi-Fi SID and password I actually keep in environmental variables, and then I use cmakelist.txt to define it, which is a good point because I've not actually added that back in. So let's just go back into cmakelist, because I forgot something. I forgot to add in this bit of chunk of code. So that's how I'm going to get my SID and password across. I'm going to pick it up from an environmental variable. So in previous versions of Mongoose, we used to write a main set credentials function in order to get our credentials in. That isn't how things are working and how things have been set up with this new version. We now need to put things into a different data structure rather than just doing it like this. So we have a new function which looks a little bit like this, which I'm going to call set Wi-Fi config, and we're going to configure it in a second. But it's basically going to put the credential data into a TCP driver Pico W data structure, and it's going to put the SID password and SID ID and SID password into there. Slight change of how things work, and unfortunately not being fully created by the wizard at the moment, but I'm sure that's going to get fixed. I've certainly had conversations with Mongoose about that. Why I'm thinking about it, I'm going to also include my state code, because that's where I'm going to start doing some work in a second or two. So what else have we got in here? As I say, this is really just going to initialize IO. It's going to initialize Mongoose. It's going to add a timer which is going to run a blink, and then it's going to keep just going through polling Mongoose, much as we've seen in most of the other applications. The magic stuff is all going on in this Mongoose folder. So in here we've got the Mongoose configuration, where we've enabled our Pico SDK. We've enabled TCP version from the Mongoose stack. We've enabled the Pico W driver from the Mongoose stack, and we've enabled a packed file system. And that file system is where all of the JavaScript and HTML is that's actually going to produce our GUI. So here again we've got a couple of things that have sort of gone. So this set credentials bit doesn't quite work like that anymore. Certainly as I've managed to get it to work and played with it. So I'm going to take that out, and actually the command instead we need is basically to link our mg set Wi-Fi config to that set Wi-Fi config function that we've just written in the main .c file. So that's what's actually going to set the SID ID and the SID password. So we've also got in here the main Mongoose file system, which is where encoded all of those wonderful JavaScript and HTML is. We won't worry too much about what's in there. We've also got the Mongoose code itself, which is up here, and then we've got this glue code, and the glue bit is the bit that actually we need to worry about a little bit, because glue is basically going to have a couple of functions. Well, it's going to have a few things in it. First of all, it's got a structure in it, which is going to be our state. There it is. There's the structure state, which contains the temperature and the boolean for LED on, and it's that we're going to work with. And then it's got a getter and a setter function for getting that or setting and updating that. And those are the two functions we need to play around with and work with in order to link the UI code to do something actually quite useful and interesting. So to make them do something actually interesting, I'm going to use these functions. So I want to be able to do a little bit of initializing the temperature sensor so I can use it, and initializing an LED. And then I want to be able to read the temperature in Celsius using that function getTemp, and I want to be able to set the LED to turn it on or off using the function setLED. Yeah, the boolean will be true for turning it on and false for turning it off. So what's in those functions? Well, those are really simple stuff that you will have seen before. So if we're initializing the temperature sensor, then we've got to initialize the ADC functions and make sure that the analog to digital converter is set up and initialized. We've got to turn on the temperature sensor because you can use it in a different way if you don't, so we need that to set it on. And then for the get temperature function, basically we're using ADC select input 4, which is the temperature sensor, and then we are going to read the value from there and use these conversion factors in order to convert it back into Celsius value. And then I'm also rounding it to 2 decimal places, because otherwise it looked naff on the UI when you've got the temperature being printed in 5 decimal places. So that's what I'm doing there. For LEDs, well, of course, we're just going to initialize the GPIO pad to be an output, and when we set it, we're just going to change the value on that GPIO output. So all really simple code right now in our state handler and how we're going to set that. Let's go and have a look at that mongoose glue.c, because that's where we're actually going to put our code. First of all, the getter. So what's this doing at the moment? Well, it's basically copying the values from our state structure, and it's actually created a static state structure that is basically just going to permanently hold that value, and it's going to hold the value of 0 and false pretty much forever, or until it's sort of changed by the UI. Now I'm going to change that a little bit because that's not what I want to be in there. I want to overwrite the value of temperature with a value that I'm actually pulling from our state code and the code we've just looked at. So we're going to need the include file for state, of course, and then we're going to need to grab the value of the temperature using the getTemp function and drop it into a temperature variable, which is in that state structure. That's easy enough. That's all we're going to do for a get. The value of on and off for LED, I'm not too worried about. It can cache it as much as it likes in that state. As far as get is concerned, it's not the value that's cached in there will be absolutely fine. In terms of set state, that's when I want to actually do something slightly different with our value within the state variable and that data that's coming in from that LED state. So here, if of course I need to, if the LED state changes, I need to actually do something to set the value of my LED. So I'm going to call that set LED function with the value in the state structure of LED on, and that should go and then call that LED function and turn the LED on or off appropriately. Of course, I could be a little bit more careful here and say, well, actually, has the value actually changed with that LED on before I actually go and do it? But turning a GPIO on or off is such a light function for a Pico. It really isn't. It will probably be more instructions worth to actually check than it would be to actually just call it and do it. So I'm just going to execute it just for simplicity right now. So that should have got us a UI, and it should have connected it up to actual functions on our Pico, and we should now be able to see that and actually get that actually to run. Let's have a go at that. So I'm going to go over now to Safari, and I'm going to put in the IP address of my Pico 2W, which I can see from the UART console as it's connected to my network. and we can see the temperature, and those lights have nicely warmed up my Pico 2W there, and you can see that my temperature of my Pico 2W is currently being reported as 29 degrees, and this is actually getting updated and pushed back through to the web page every 2 seconds, as you can just see actually it's changing there. And of course I've also got this LED control above there, so I can turn the LED on and I can turn the LED off, and that's beautifully controlled and feels really good. The other thing to note on this as well is we've got this little green dot that's appeared up there. I don't remember putting a green dot on our web page when we were designing it. No, well, actually, this actually is telling me whether my device is connected or not. And it's because it's actually got a heartbeat going through every 2 seconds in the background and saying whether the device is actually connected. And it's that which then's triggering it to actually pull back the state and update that temperature gauge there every 2 seconds. So there's a demo. It isn't the most wonderful looking dashboard, I know, but I wanted to do something that was easy, quick and easy to show you how the technology works, rather than all of the detail of making nice looking web pages, which I am by far not the master at. This new UI builder really works quite well on the Mongoose Web platform. It's a huge step forward and will save me time. Though of course in some of my projects I'm still going to write my own custom and smart UIs. In other projects the automated one is actually going to be really very useful. If you like this video and it helps your learning or projects, why not drop me a cash tip using that super thanks button below the video or the payment link that's in the description. Remember that I'm saving these up to get myself to the open source conference in San Francisco, and I'd appreciate your help in getting me there, and I'd love to meet you there and shake your hand there too. Thank you very much for watching. Please do like the video and subscribe, and I will see you on the next video. Bye bye for now.